I am incredibly grateful, and there's been a lot of amazing things that happen. I've also worked my ass off for it. I have many close friends that I no longer speak to by sacrifice that I have to make.
Hi, Tyler. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be here with you.
Jeremy is like, little secret, guys. Jeremy is so excited. So excited. I mean, we all are, but Jeremy especially.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped. It's always funny, those kind of episodes, because I watch you, like, now every Wednesday I tell Rosie I'm watching The Boys, and she know what I mean.
Yeah, it's The Boys.
Okay? I've been watching you on a podcast for like 2 years, and you know,
appreciate it.
It's funny because like I feel like I see you every week.
It's very humbling, and I actually sit back and think sometimes about the podcast and the reach that it's, you know, now had, and I meet a lot of people, and I'm very fortunate, and so thank you. I don't take that lightly. It's we've had a fun run. We had a good recording this morning, so I'm excited to see.
Excited for it tomorrow.
For the episode to come out tomorrow. Yeah, it's been like a fun mix of sports and randomness and sports cards. It's been cool.
So you are in New York. You're
Yes.
American. You've been to Penn State University. You've been working around the GaryVee ecosystem for a few years. You've been his assistant. You're now General Manager of ONE37pm. And yeah, the reason I wanted to bring you on the show was to basically, you're 29, right?
30. Turned 30
Oh.
in June. So, yep, 91. June 2nd, 91. So
And-
June 2nd, I'll turn 31.
And, you know, I feel from watching you every week, you're doing something that you love.
Very much so.
With people that you love in a very cool ecosystem. And I think, you know, there is lessons that can be learned here for people, that you can do something, you can have a 9 to 5 and do something that you love deeply every single day and work around your passion. So this is something really I wanted to talk, because we hear about those sad story about, you know, how the 9 to 5 is always, now 9 to 5 is being really like shit on, you know, like this bad thing, when actually you can have a job and be very happy with it and do something that you really love. So, you know, maybe let's start with just, like where did you grow up and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, on the part about, you know, from the outside, you know, perspective and loving your job and loving the day-to-day and being so happy and all these things, like, I just, I think sometimes there's danger in looking at other individuals and only taking one side of a coin. And what I mean by that is, and Gary talks about this, you know, a lot, is like, there's, every day is a new day. And so we need to, and America specifically does a real job in, like, you need to be like that, and you need to like, you should look like that, and you should listen to that, and you should dress like that, and you should feel that way, and you should take this pill and that pill and everything. And I think that the reality is that there's this like matrix between, one, everyone's different, and two, timing matters. And so even in a world where that people are like toxic positivity, overtly happiness, obviously the last 2 years and what that's done to people's mental health, like, there's just some weird energy going on in the world right now. And so I just would always say to people, like, I have days, I have periods of time. I mean, I speak to Gary at length about it. Like, it's not like I wake up every day and I'm like, just like, my life is like amazing. You know, it's like, there's a lot of things in my life that are not per se, you know, or like things that I struggle with or deal with, or whether it's family or even work, or like, and it's just like, you've got to, I guess, realize that the only answer is from within. Like there's no external. What I've learned is really nothing externally can fix it. And I think that the thing about Gary and why he's gotten so maybe big, or the way his communication style, like a lot of his things he talks about is just a mirror to be able to have your own conversations with yourself. Right? There's what people want, and there's what people are willing to do to get what they want.
Yeah.
And by and large, especially coming from a white male that grew up in a suburb of New York City, you know, like coddling or confusion. And I'm now coming into a realization of like, as I'm moving into a place, or when I start thinking about having a family, like parents only want their kid to be safe and comfortable and believe that they're the best God gifts, you know, like to man. And that's the job of like a mother. Like I'm a mama's boy. Like I'm a mother's, like I'm a mama's boy. I'm the middle child. I have an older sister, a younger sister. Like, so like empath, like all these emotions. Like, but like my mom wants safety and comfort and the best for me. And so I guess where I'm going is just like it starts and ends with what you want. And are you willing to do what it takes? And I've been around Gary long enough, like the sacrifices, the things, everyone's like, oh, it'd be nice to be that. And when people shit on him, like, no one understands the work that he puts in on a daily basis with himself, the decisions that he has to make. And so I think that anytime when we look at people and think it's all amazing, if it's something that you attain, make sure you understand also there's a lot of things or other aspects. What it takes to get there, and also the collateral of some of it. Right? Think about an NBA player. There's probably I think about this a lot with like actors, or the Grammys and the Grammys and the Oscars were just came up. Or Carlos Alcaraz just won the Miami Open, best young tennis prospect since Rafa Nadal. Do you think there's nights that he's sat in his room, cried, and wondering if he's made the right decision because he's had friends that he no longer speaks to, or aunts and uncles that want things from him because he now has money? It's just there's always other stuff. And so I just worry at times of like, I am incredibly grateful, and there's been a lot of amazing things that happen. I've also worked my ass off for it. I have many close friends that I no longer speak to by sacrifice that I have to make, like weddings this weekend or not. And then above all that is that you have to be willing to understand that humans change and things change. And we were just talking about, you have your own family stuff and plans come up, and like, it's just time is also a factor. Circumstance is also a factor. Serendipity is a factor in life. And you got to equate all that.
Yeah, definitely.
I think a big thing these days is that it's so easy to look on social media and compare yourself to everybody's highlight reel. And like, people think that we're living the dream, and it's like, no, there's stuff going on that I'm not talking about. And I think that's the same for everybody. Once you realize that, it can be quite comforting to know that everyone's got their own shit. And like, everyone's dealing with stuff, and not everybody's life is perfect, but it is sometimes quite hard to see that because everybody portrays their best things and they don't necessarily always talk about the hardships that they're going through as well. So I think that's the kind of struggle, these days. But
totally. No. And we're in COVID did this messed up thing where everyone had the same issue. So it's almost devalued people's stuff, issues. And then I think people have a very hard time with either confrontation right now, or hearing feedback from people, or, like everyone is working on something or has an unopened answer of like what is happening or what is next. So whether it's strangers or just like the level of, not necessarily mean, but maybe I just feel we're all very defensive right now. And I'm trying to understand a little bit of it, but I think as a macro, humans are like, everyone's got this major issue that they're trying to navigate. And so when someone comes at you about something else, even if it's from a place of trying to help, there's a lot of like biting back.
Yeah.
And I just there's a lot of healing in that too. Like, you know, whether it's comedy or what happened at the Oscars with, you know, like with Will Smith. I mean, my own point of view, I look at that and I'm like, people haven't taken jokes in 2 years in person, and it's just there's just levels of different stuff.
Yeah.
There was this kind of vibration that changed, frequency that's changed, and so yeah, I'm just trying to do a better job at like it's not always all roses.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that aside, as we started that, then you got into where you're from, what's going on, what have you. I'm currently sitting in Hudson Yards in New York City. We've been in this office for about 5 years now. I think we were one of the first tenants that moved in. I grew up in a town called Montclair, New Jersey. Okay. My mother is, I believe, firstborn American of Danish descent, went to boarding school in Switzerland, so comes from a very, just what I would say, like, global view. So growing up, like, it's funny now, and globalization obviously has happened in an immense way over the last 20, 30 years, and what the iPhone's done, and F1 with Netflix. But like, I grew up with BBC on in my house, BBC World News. You know, like I grew up, Tour de France was always on the TV. Like, Premier League soccer's been in my life since the mid 90s, and so and then on top of it, 2 doors down, I lived on a 5, house cul-de-sac. 2 doors down, one of my closest friends in the world, Matt Lesniak, moved in. We were 3 years old. He was, his mother was an immigrant from France. And so they spoke French in their household. And I spent a lot of my childhood in that household. So I just I had a very kind of worldly view on things. And I'm now, as I get older, very appreciative and fortunate for that. The juxtaposition is that my father was one of 9, like, from the Philly suburbs, like, American, and so I got a lot of, like, different, clashes and tastes and different things going on. And I went to Penn State. I was in high school and went to Penn State. I studied hospitality there as, like, an applied business degree, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do per se. And I graduated. I started working at a restaurant, a startup, like restaurant chain. And this was when this notion of fast casual was really starting to take off. Fast casual is like Chipotle, like upscale fast food, it like cut out what we'll call like the Olive Gardens and Boston markets of the world where you like sit down. And I think that was a reaction to what I'd call like iPhone culture in business and the always on connectivity. So you couldn't leave the office for 90 minutes and no one was calling your desk and leaving a voice message that you were getting back to. Once you were always on and always available, you were going out, getting food and bringing it back to your desk because people would just call you back, where are you? And you're like, I'm at lunch. Like, that was like a change in that. So fast casual was like my thing. I was like, that's what I did my thesis on. It's going to be huge. And once we opened, all I wanted to do was the marketing and communications in and around the restaurant. And person I worked with connected me, and I landed at VaynerMedia. I walked into the doors of VaynerMedia on November 11th, 2013. It was about, I think I was like the 291st employee, something like that. Company's now maybe 1,700 people. That's 8.5 years ago, and it's been a wild ride along the way.
When you joined, was he already famous? Because Jeremy loves GaryVee, so I've heard of him through Jeremy, but he's not someone that I personally watch and know a lot about. So was he already like a big person that you knew about? Obviously, he had 200 people in his company. So when
I started, the November 11th was a Friday because I got invited. I was supposed to start. My start date was on Monday, which was November, I believe, 14th. But I got called in to come in because it was like a company, what they called Vayner Day on the Friday, and it would be the whole company would shut down for the day. They'd do half the day working on charitable initiatives through social and like giving our time, energy, and effort to that, and then half the day like just talent show, party, like celebrate the culture.
Pretty
So
cool.
that was my first day in the office. We're like playing beer pong or like flip cup. I'm like, this is fucking cool. And then, but so I show up on Monday, and my point being is that on the Sunday of that weekend, Gary was on the cover of the New York Times Sunday Business because he had just released his book called Crush It.
Yeah.
I believe that was Crush It. And so while Gary wasn't famous, Gary was in this very niche pocket of leading in what we may call online business. When I first started working at VaynerMedia, there was no videos on Facebook. There was no advertising on Facebook, meaning you couldn't buy ad units on Facebook. Twitter, I probably had an iPhone for 2 or 3 years at that point. Many also didn't. Twitter was like a SMS platform for a long period of time. So these platforms were very young, but he was a mover and shaker on them. He was one of the first people to have 1 million followers on Twitter, but even when he had 1 million followers on Twitter, mainstream media was like, what's Twitter?
Yeah.
You know? So while he had a following, while he was an early investor in companies like Facebook and Twitter at that time, mainstream famous, no.
Not yet. Yeah.
He had under 10,000 followers on Instagram. So it wasn't like that, but he had a very dedicated following. What I'll say is he's the exact same person from a clarity of his vision, confidence in his own abilities to achieve what he wants, and the willingness to put in whatever it took to get to what needed to be done.
So why did you apply to VaynerMedia?
Because I was a techie kid. I loved Apple. I wasn't a techie kid like a computer like coder.
Right.
We always had computers in my house because I loved video games, and so my dad always supported us in terms of like if I was like really into something enough, he was into it. So we had Dell computers, towers, and then this company Apple was coming up. And me and my dad bought Apple computers. I believe the first one we actually got, luckily I was in a town where they were putting the Macs in like my middle school with the colors. We bought the Apple, and I had an Apple computer in my room in like 6th grade, I think. Fifth grade, maybe 6th grade. Then the iPhone came out. When I turned 16, I had like some bonds that I was like given at birth. My dad was a financial advisor. He bought me Apple stock when it was $90 a share. So I was just early into Apple. As like Steve Jobs, I was like, that dude's a gangster, and Apple is really cool. I remember watching the first iPhone keynote. People forget that the iPhone was out for like 2 or 3 years before the App Store even came out. And so that led me to Twitter. I signed up for Twitter, I believe, in 2009. And so I've been on the platform for 13 years, almost half my life. And so all that being said, when we opened the restaurant, I'm like, we need to have a fire Instagram account. We need to have a fire Twitter account to get people in here. When I was even in college for like our big like capstone for our hospitality major was we had to put on 2 full-scale like dinners, theme, menu, everything. And all I did was like market it, and I'm like, I'll just get it. Whatever it is, I'll sell it out. Yeah. Because I have a lot of friends, and I use Twitter, and I'll get people to come and all that. So when we had the startup, I've been working there 3 months. I'm like, I want to run the Twitter. They're like, we have a 1-person marketing, department. You're not going to go work on marketing. We're a startup. But the entrepreneur founder of that whole company called the Taco Truck, his wife was a successful marketing executive. And so when I was meeting with her, I'm like, I'm into social. She's like, you should check out this little social media shop that's on the come up. Someone that I used to work with now works there. Connected me there. met. It was connection, one meeting, 2 meeting, interview, got hired. I got hired as a community manager on Brisk Iced Tea. So I didn't know what VaynerMedia was. I didn't go looking to be in an advertising agency. It was just connection, and I was like, this is cool. Yeah. And so then I ended up at Vayner, and I didn't know who Gary Vaynerchuk was when I took the job.
Interesting.
That's so interesting, because now I bet people apply just because it's him. Yeah. They're like, I want to work for Gary.
Yeah.
In a real way. In a massive way.
So how did you then go from marketing to being his assistant, which I believe you were? How did that happen?
So it was like desks. Let's see if you can see out there. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Desks, rows. This was not our office at the time. We were at a different office on 23rd and Park. And like most things in life, and when I say to you serendipity and like randomness, I got put on Brisk Iced Tea as an account. Brisk Iced Tea was the first brand to post on Instagram. So the way that it worked is my job was community manager. Community managers got paired up with a position that was called a micro content producer. So the micro content producer was a little bit more of a creative. They could do Photoshop. They were a little bit more of the creative side. The community manager would post and monitor, right? So one thing I talk about with social is a lot of people just think you come up with an idea, you make it, and you post it, and that's the life cycle. I'm like, content doesn't begin until you hit post, and then you understand like the post analyzation, what's working, what's not, why is this working, what can we learn from it, what can we never do again, what do we implement into our next stuff. Yeah. So that was a partnership, micro content producer and community manager. The Kenny Crocker was my micro content producer partner. His roommate was a gentleman named Matt DeMeo, who at the time was Gary's assistant.
Okay.
They were both Jersey boys. Actually, Matt DeMeo was a Long Island kid, but they both lived in Hoboken together, and they were both big Yankee fans. We connected over all that. Yankees, degeneracy, whatever, blah, 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 blah. We were homies. So Matt DeMeo knew who I was. I get a call on a random, like, Tuesday night at, like, 9:45 at night. I'm living out in Montclair, New Jersey, which is 12 miles west of Manhattan, from Matt DeMeo. Hey, do you want to play basketball tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. in Manhattan? Gary, we need a 10th person. Gary and AJ do these basketball runs. The person just dropped out. Would you want to play? Yes, I want to play. No. Listen, do you understand what you're committing to? If you don't show up, I will be fired, and you will probably be fired as well. This isn't like you can maybe come. Like, if you're not there on time, your job's at stake. I'm like, that's dope. I'm liking that. So that kicked off me getting, thankfully, my mother used to drive me at 4:15 in the morning. I would take a 4:30 or 4:45 train into the city once or twice a week, and I never said no to playing in that game ever again, again. And so that's how I met Gary and AJ, showing up and playing basketball with them. I probably played basketball with them for 5 months, all the time, giving him a freaking all and making sure that it's not confusion to me that there's a lot that you can learn on the field of competition about humans. And so I showed up, I got to know those guys and just continued to work. It was nothing more than, hey, playing basketball, goodbye. I've played sports my whole life. Like, I know the people I want to play with. I know the people I don't want to play with. I know the people I want to compete. I know the people I want to beat. I know the people that I want to be around and how it impacts business, blah, 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 blah. And then one day I had a random check-in with my manager at the time, which was called an engagement manager. And I remember vivid as day where we were sitting, what room. She started to say, AJ is looking for an assistant. And I was like, I need that job.
AJ
and it goes back
brother.
to AJ is Gary's younger brother.
Oh, okay.
He was the COO at the time.
Okay.
And he's maybe 3 years older than me. 2 or 3 or 4 years older than me. So there's a little bit of a less age difference. Gangster, sharp mind as all hell, and just a beast. And for me, like, I was like, one, hospitality and service and all that I love. And two, just being as close to the game as possible. So I did everything in my power to land that role, and thankfully I did. That was, since then, it's just been one consistent game of showing up.
You know what's interesting? I feel a lot of people would hear the word assistant. It can be, maybe diminishing, like, oh, you're just the assistant. And I think maybe people don't see the value that this job can bring to you. But I'm sure you must have learned so much from being around people like them, right?
Yeah, I think that, to your point, yes. Like, people think assistant is a demeaning thing. And I think that there's more to work, not necessarily. I operate under you get out of things what you put in. And so this notion, public schooling messes up a lot of individuals. Just because you show up, if you get a D, at the end of the year, you get a promotion and a raise. Right? So you can be a bat, as long as you're literally not like putting the place on fire, just for being there, you're getting a promotion and a raise. And I think that as companies get bigger in scale, that's also how it kind of operates at times. I also think that LinkedIn has created this overtly posturing for titles and like clout and playing to a title versus playing to actual skill. Something that Gary's gotten a lot of flack for over the years is this notion of working for free. And why would you want people to work for free? Yet, apprenticeships not too long ago were incredibly honorable. And still, across Europe, at a certain age, many times 15, 16, you have the path and choice to take on a technical vocational education as opposed to a more liberal arts or, mathematical type of thing.
So my dad did.
And it's probably been able to build a business and do things. And so this notion of like, just because you have a college degree or just because your mom thinks you're the best human in the world doesn't equate to success. And my mother, because of, I think, her European backgrounds, like always, like never let me settle. I mean, in the real way of like 98, yes, good job, could be 100. That's good, but that's great. But, and it was more so, it wasn't a demeaning. It was just always like, don't be confused about what is left on, like what you can still do. And then the work for free thing, which was like what Gary really, I guess taught me, but I journal, and I've always journaled. And since like my first days at Vayner, and why I did the basketball is like, you have to create your own opportunities. Going on this podcast, who the hell knows? I don't know. We might be best friends. When I come up to Manchester, like maybe 5 years from now, I don't know, but maybe not, but I don't know. But you only know by doing, and also it's something I'm trying to now, like with our culture and with the office, like working from home is amazing and nice, but you can't tell me it's not, again, like comfort and safety only leads to more comfort and safety. And magic happens in uncomfortability and, like challenging yourself. Yeah. And so that, I think that whether you're working for a company or whether you're in school, one thing my father line always was, don't let schooling get in the way of your education. So like when I was paying $32,000, it's a Mark Twain quote, it's a fantastic quote. When I was paying $32,000 for college a year, and it's still student loans to this day, most people don't realize that the professor works for you. You're paying the professor, right? And so I guess what I mean by that is, like, I think about college. I'm like, the college thing shitty. Like, I think college can be great if you go to college understanding that you should be doing everything, the work and all of that, like the actual curriculum of school. No. I think college should be an experiment in understanding how do you utilize resources, how do you get to know everyone, how do you learn leverage, how do you build a relationship with your teacher? Because if you think that a teacher looks at a paper and has a deep relationship with a student, or a teacher looks at a paper and doesn't know who wrote it, they're grading it differently. That's how humans work. When I think about getting curriculums, every start of semester, I would look at every curriculum and I'd pretty much decide what grade I want to get in the classes based on how much energy and effort needs to go into that grade. So if I need to put a ton of work in to get a B, and there's another class that I don't have to put that much work in to get an A, like that was just decisions, right? Like life-based decisions. Like, attendance in this class is worth 80%. Attendance in that class is worth 20%. Go to the one that it's worth 80%. Take the time back on the one that's worth 20%. You know, so that is what I think college is great about. But I also think that with jobs, like, and I think that when I employ people, I'm like, great, you want to treat this as a transactional job? That's what you're going to get out of it. You want to see this as an opportunity to learn, grow, be mentored, try, challenge. That's what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And everything you just say really answer one of my questions I had for you. Is like, how do you become general manager when you're 29? You know, that makes total sense, because basically you have been on an internship for years, basically learning from those guys, learning how they manage people, how they operate with people, how they do business and everything. And by being around them, you just learn from them like a sponge, and suddenly you acquire the skills, basically. And that's really cool. That's really cool. That makes sense.
So the individual that took over for Jeff Bezos as the CEO of Amazon, to my understanding, has been
He was
there.
a CEO, I think.
He ran Amazon Web Services before.
Oh, yeah.
And he has been, I'm trying to think, how long has Andy Jassy
he's been there for ages, probably,
worked at Amazon? 24 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
24 years
Like
it took him to become the CEO of the company. And that's a bit of what I mean. Now, has he had good jobs along the way? Sure, what have you. But back to the LinkedIn generation, like, if he cared along the way about all the little things, you never would have gotten to there. And so I also think leverage is not taught in life, and definitely in normal education, in terms of how to build leverage for yourself. And I think about all the time, energy, effort that I put in with Gary and One Layer and AJ and every single human in this company. That's why I think the assistant role is the best job in the world. You just get to help people all the time. What do you think's going to happen? They're going to be like, all right, so I owe you something, you know, whatever. And it's not so much about the I owe you, you owe me thing, but I think about it as stacking chips, like, you know, even whether it's Ethereum, there's a lot of different ways I could take this, but I think about how many, a piggy bank. You can put a penny into the piggy bank every day and you can take it out and get a lollipop for 1 penny. Or you can put a penny into the bank for 365 days, and at the end of 365 days have 365 pennies and get a lollipop up here.
Yeah.
And everyone has their decisions, but most people want the biggest lollipop while also getting a lollipop every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah. So.
And that's the point of where you asked, how do I get to this role at 29? Andy K, who's my boy, is the president of VeeFriends, which is a massive company. He's 34. he started at the company a bit before me. For the first, I believe, 3 months, he tweeted at Gary, asked him to work for free. For 3 months, he worked for $7.50 an hour, and he's probably averaged 70 hours of work a week for the last 8 years. That's how he got the job. Because you leave it to no discussion or debate about who the best person for the role is. It doesn't become a should it becomes the only option.
Yeah. It's like obvious. It's like, well, of course you would hire that person.
Exactly.
Why wouldn't you?
And the reality, though, is, but also when people do that, they do it with expectation of what's to come, which can also be dangerous.
Yeah.
Because when it doesn't happen, then you just collapse. Because if you live like no one actually owes you and you're secretly just building your own skills and reps, and that's why I say, like, use your job. There's not just for money, though. Use it for your own to get better, your own skills, your own, and that's where it clicks about happiness and doing something that you love, because you're actually getting better at something you want to get better at, not what the company needs you to be good at.
Yeah.
When 137 was created, how did the opportunity came for you to work for 137?
So we acquired VaynerX. Gary really acquired a female women's lifestyle publication called Pure Wow. A gentleman named Ryan Harwood founded that business. I worked in Gary's office, so I knew everyone that was coming through, acquisitions, this, that, the other, When they acquired that, they kind of rolled it up into this larger publishing company, Gary Media Group, and launched that company 137pm. It was around for about 2 years before I took the role, I took it almost, 14 months now or 13 months ago. And I was actively searching for the person that was going to run it, to be the editor-in-chief of it. And we just couldn't land on that individual. And so one night late, I called Gary and said, hey, I think I should just do this. And he said, all right, sleep on it. Call me back tomorrow if that's the same decision. And I called him back, and that was how that happened. It wasn't even a thought, question, or debate, to be frank.
Yeah. It's interesting. You were looking for someone, and you were this someone, basically.
Yeah. I just knew... Keep going.
No, go ahead.
Why is it called 137pm?
Yeah, I was going to say, what happens at 137?
Yeah, it was, we were just trying to come up with what it was, how we wanted to play it, how we wanted to angle it, etc. And Gary, it was hot on a lot of random things, but we kind of came up with this tagline, own your future, start this minute. It was about entrepreneurship, very much is what the brand was rooted in. And they decided, and the time was at 1:37 p.m. So it's not too much more than that.
Okay.
I actually do remember when it launched. I remember the Instagram posts and everything, when like all the teasing about like he's going to be launching at this time and whatever. And I do remember it now that you say that. It's actually interesting because when I first went on the website like, a few years ago, it was blog posts. Like, it was the website with like blog posts about sneakers, Pokemon cards, hip hop, stuff like that.
Yeah.
What attracted you in having this position? What was your interest there, personally? Building
a brand that people can. I just like brands, and so to me, it's about impacting culture and creating a brand that can resonate with people. That's what it's about for me.
And I guess also the reason is because obviously the topic is appealing to you, right? Sports.
Yeah, I mean,
culture,
exactly. And I can, back to what we talked about with F1, back to what we talked about with Tour de France. Is like something I think the Tour has a real moment that's to come in the next 2-3 years. People are
Well, you know, the guy who
cycling.
directed Drive to Survive is doing a
Is doing the
Drive to Survive for Tour de France, right?
Yep. Yeah. And you listen to Car Talk, so you know that I was saying it 3 episodes before the announcement came out because it's just obvious.
Yeah.
It makes sense. You know, Gary just bought a pickleball team. Like, there's just the more you are open-minded, you realize that so many people are curious to everything. So personally, I've always been into brand. I've always been into culture. I've always kind of been like I've had a lot of great influences in terms of just what I was exposed to. I come from a very diverse Montclair, the town I grew up in. You know, like the high school is one of the most diverse high schools in the country, both from a racial but also wealth in the town is like really diverse. So I just, for me, it's about being able to create a brand that I'm pumped about, as well as impact a lot of people that can work on the team. I think that's something I'm having the most fun with, is the hiring and mentoring. And
But how easy or hard was it for you to suddenly be in charge of a team and hiring people? You've been growing so fast, man. I've seen, like, every time you post about hiring people, like, it's crazy how the rate you're growing.
Yeah, largely because Gary is backing that with trust. It's not easy. It's, again, back to the point of like what I started with, is because that's a lot of what I would say my energy right now is like, I mean, it's not easy. We're 45 people now, you know, that I manage and that ladder up to me, and those are thoughts and feelings and emotions. And, you know, I'm not speaking to Gary every day and getting feedback and like, you know, all the things he's always talked about. It's lonely. The buck stops with you. Like, no, it's not all amazing and fun and roses and all that. Card Talk. 5 days before the end of the year, eBay pulled out their sponsorship for this year. It was a fairly substantial like sponsorship. So like it's just, but it keeps you waking up, and I know that overall we're impacting a lot of people, and the people on the team, there's tough conversations, there's people that leave, people that come back, people that have to get let go. It's just all just one day at a time, kind of like in continuous, you know, nature. And you have to always be innovating. You cannot, in today's day and age in business, and content, like, if you're not changing, you're not trying. If you're not iterating, you're being left behind. There's just so much. And that's what I've come to realize, like, my role is general manager is to put people in positions to succeed, to be able to do their best work. And then realize that also the time factor. So someone may be doing amazing for 6 months in a specific position and they have a new interest. And think about this, the majority of people I'm hiring, they were remote, many times first job out of college. Starting your first job ever from your bedroom on Zoom is like
weird,
crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm empathetic to that. But like, I also know that if you don't have to be in the office, the likelihood that you sign on at 9:45 compared to 9 a.m. is incredibly high. And I don't think most people that are signing on at 9:45 are like, I'm going to stay till 6:45 today. So there's pros and cons with all of it. To me, managing people or leading people, to be frank, is like something that I just love. I've always done it. Or attempted to find those positions, and I think that's by and large my mom, like 5th grade president, 8th grade president of my fraternity, was on the lacrosse team, the clubs. I just like, it was always that. I like speaking, I like leading, and so that's where I have the most fun with, is like being able to actually impact. And again, back to the fortunate nature of the 8 years of being an assistant, or 7 or 6 years of being an assistant, I got to know everyone in the company. I got to understand Gary's vision. I got to understand what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to do. So to me, it's about a much bigger thing than just 137pm. You know, 137pm is a brand, a part of what we are doing in the overall macro mission of Gary's world. And that gives me the ability to almost play Plinko board and understand that there's a lot of people that come onto this company that it like 137 p.m. isn't even the right role for them, but you got to go through the motions to figure that out and learn that.
Yeah. Something I wanted to talk about as well is more like personal than business oriented. You are the most bullish American on football, but real football. Soccer, like they say over there. Also very bullish on digital collectibles, stuff like that. You're very, I would say, ahead of the game on a lot of things compared to the mass population, I would say. Have you always been like curious to try different things, to go where maybe people don't like to go? Like, is that something that's just who you are in your personality?
Yeah, I remember vividly my neighbor. So on one side was the French household, the other, there was three of us all the same age, family from more Massachusetts area. And I remember that the father said to me, "Why won't you stop asking me questions?" All I did was ask him the questions. And I think it also came from just like my mother, like, whether it was going to museums growing up, whether it was going to church, whether it was she does needlepoint and knitting, and whether it was going to Broadway shows, or whether, like, I was just like, my mom didn't let us watch American sports on both days on the weekends, and like has almost a disdain for American sports by and large because it's all whistles, commercial breaks, and advertising.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so, like, I was watching, like, the American Kennel Club dog show at, like, 8 years old. Like, I think some of the best television programming in the world is CBS Sunday Morning. Like NPR, the reason Card Talk is because there's a famous radio program called Car Talk on NPR. And so, I don't know, my dad used to take me on 2-hour car drives to look at the cherry blossoms in Newark. I don't know. It's by and large a product of my environment, and I've always been an incredibly curious individual. And I think and that's why we changed 137 p.m. Our tagline is now "For the Curious." Yeah. I think that obviously the explosion of the internet, I believe niche is dead. Niche does not exist because you can find niche pockets. What you think is a niche, go to the bonsai forum on Reddit and tell me bonsais are a niche. It's just not true. There's multiple accounts with over 100,000 followers on Instagram around bonsais. And so that's what I mean. Everything is multi-hyphenated, like, and people have micro interests in a lot of different things because there's so many more options nowadays. And so I think that there's a lot of fun in that.
Good combination when you're very curious, hardworking, and a bit of vision where you can see where things are going. That's a good recipe. If you have the right mindset and things to be at the right place, and timing and everything.
I mean, that combined, again, back to serendipity, I believe I'm very fortunate that I got paired with Gary and AJ that see that as a strength, because corporate America would see that as a weakness. Like, I'm the definition of get bored of shit after a couple of weeks or months.
Same.
I
have that too.
I'm like, all right, that was fun while it lasted. Like, all right, on to the next thing.
Everybody thinks that's a bad thing, don't they? Like, oh, you can't stick to anything. And I'm like, yeah, but I just know I know a little bit about a lot of different things because I'm just...
Yeah.
It's fun for a couple of weeks and then I'm bored and I get on to the next thing.
My dad, this was a thing with sports too, where Gary and I are different in that capacity. But like last night was the men's basketball championship. And in sports, even as the number one team I was into growing up was the New York Yankees, and they were very good. But when it got to the World Series or any series, I'd be like, Dad, who do you like? What? He'd be like, we want Game 7, ninth inning, we just want a good game. We want a good performance. I don't care who wins. I just want good entertainment. And that also gave me this like it is what it is. I just want to see some good stuff versus like, damn it, that didn't happen. Like, that's the end of this. Like, what have you? I get just being able to make light out of like, oh, that's cool. I believe I genuinely can find interest in anything. Take this box. One thing I used to talk to my dad a lot about, and this was a big thing in Apple, was their packaging. Like,
it's an experience.
Now think about that. Like the amount of time that people are like packaging. There's people out there that are like literally going crazy on that. That's kind of, I mean, just why, what is Expo? These are famous, dry erase markers.
Yeah.
On their caps, they have this little like swoosh thing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's for grip, but I don't know why. But I'm interested to find out why.
Yeah.
It's fun being curious like that, though, because you'll just Google random things and just know lots of random. But then also, like, that swoosh being on that top of the lid thing, then at some point in 3 years' time, might be like, oh, well, I could, I'm inspired by that lid that one time. And, like, it's interesting how things all come around and inspire each other. And
well, and life is fun this way also. Like, rather than seeing, the boring side on everything, you can also choose, and it's a choice, to see.
It is.
To investigate, to be curious, to dig or no into X, Y, Z, whatever. But it makes life, a lot of people complain about, my life is so boring.
Yeah.
I'm doing the same every day, the routine, blah, blah, blah. When you can find new things to challenge yourself every single day, even if you do the same things every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can
and
find
everyone
new things
has the thing. The beautiful, we're all different. We're all into, there's different triggers for everyone. The beautiful part about curiosity is you have far more at bats at finding what it might be.
Yeah. That's been really cool, Tyler. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Yeah.
I've got one last question before we wrap it up.
Before you ask that one, I have a question.
Yeah.
Amazing.
This might be a bit random that I'm asking, but so would you say that you and Gary are friends?
Yes. Family,
Is it
I'd
weird?
go so far as to say.
Is it weird that you're friends with someone who's got such a huge impact on other people's lives and like spouts so much wisdom and so much innovation and so much forward thinking, and like he's such a huge, like for Jeremy, he's a huge inspiration. And for a lot of people, is it weird to like have his number and be able to call him and be like, yo, Gary, what's up? I've got this idea. Or do you not see him as that? Is like, I don't know.
It's not weird. It's not weird, which is also why, to be frank, like I think, which is part of why.
Oh, because it works. Because you're not like
works.
idolizing him, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
It goes back again to my parents. Like, there's a lot of people that have impacted. My father, like the postman and the ice cream man, were two of my dad's like homies. Like. I saw him always interacting with those people, or a waitress or a waiter, or we belonged to the tennis club, growing up. And he was always friends with like the youngest employee that just started, like helping him out. And then my mother always made me say hello to everyone. Like always made me. You go to a friend's house, you walk into the kitchen and you say hello to the parents and you say, thanks for having me there. And so I kind of like started to learn and realize that my parents were very open with me as a child. Like they always like told me how they saw it. And there's like a complete, different path, but like the notion of cannabis and alcohol in this country and alcohol being propped up and then what it does to people, and then cannabis being seen as the devil and what it does to people, and then learning at 7 years old that that's all a crock of shit, and that people that are drinking vodka and are messing shit up, like everyone, like back to everyone has their stuff. I just believe is so dialed in on what he wants to accomplish, the willingness that he's willing to put into it. Like, that's what I kind of maybe look up to a little bit. But I've been around him enough. I don't have that much more interest in him versus 40 other people. So it's not weird to me, but it's definitely, I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
I'm super aware of it. I'm also aware of why people want to speak to me at times. Like, I'm not confused about, like, I get calls or texts or this or that, you know. But yeah, he's just a genuine, like, friend. I think of him as like an older brother of mine.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good
and
answer.
It's cool.
That's
and
cool.
when you're close to it, it's like...
I guess that's the thing, because it just becomes it's just Gary. Like, it's not...
Yeah.
It's just a friend. It's just someone you work with, someone, like...
And it's back to, like, the point I was making about the sacrifices, like Carlos Alcaraz or, you know, the impact. I have close friends that don't like Gary. Now, we're not as close as we used to be because I've made my decisions, but those are like sacrifices and thoughts that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
And so, no, I don't. I don't. But it also doesn't. I'm not caught off guard when people are like, "Oh my goodness, you know Gary." Like, I understand the impact. I mean,
Yeah.
I've read more emails than you know what to count, like, than you'd want to know about, hey, I was suicidal, like literally in the act, and I just put your video on and you saved my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Right.
awesome.
Back to your final question, sorry.
Yeah.
I had to ask that because I was
I
curious
like
the whole episode.
it was a good question. It was a very good question. I don't, but I think also it's why it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, because had you like idolized and be like, oh my god, it's GaryVee, and like worship the ground he walks on and like take everything he says as like magic, you wouldn't then be able to say, oh, actually, I disagree with you on that one, because you'd just be so enamored with him. Whereas
or
I think
who
it
wants
works
someone
that you
around
see
them
him.
all the time just telling you you're the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah,
now,
and agrees
he
with
might
everything you're
actually
saying.
say he does. But, like, I learned that. Like, you got to know when to give the love, when to give space, when to understand, you know, and that's back to the assistant thing. Like, back to hospitality, I think it's very honorable to be in service of someone. If you understand that it's honorable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of au pairs that love that relationship. And it's a really symbiotic relationship because there's, like, helping a family scale, like, what they need, you know. I always thought of it as service of those people that think it. Like, I'm in service of that. So, yeah.
So we ask this question at the end of every episode. If you could have a conversation with anyone, dead or alive, famous or not, that you think is the most interesting person ever for you, who would you pick and why?
My mother's father. I never had the opportunity to meet him. He had a heart attack when I think he was in his mid-50s. He had businesses all over the world, and the way that my mother speaks of him is that is the single answer. Yeah, it would be my mother's father. Yeah,
Awesome.
I don't know any of her family. Really, there's like just a lot of dynamics there, and that'll be my answer.
Fun fact, that's always my answer. My
Really?
mum's dad also had a heart attack in his 50s and I never met him. And my grandma is still madly in love with him 40 years later. So, same.
That's amazing. That's fun.
Yeah. I love that you came out with it straight away as well, because some people are like,
Think about it.
and they're like stuck for a minute. But I love that you were like, nope, straight away, that's who I would talk to.
Yeah, the things I would do for that conversation are, just about anything. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been wonderful talking to you. And
We should just hang more often.
Thank you. Thank you
Let
so
us
much.
know
Really
next time
appreciate
you
it.
come to Liverpool or Manchester. We'll make the journey and come and visit you and
I will be sure to.
hang out.
Thank
That'll
you
be
so
cool,
much
yeah.
for taking the time.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you again next Wednesday.